I am a big fan of Sorcery Contested Realm. I personally was a Magic player who was introduced to this game from a friend, and I have just become absolutely obsessed with the way the cards are designed and the way the game plays. It genuinely reminds me of those early days of Magic that I was not actually around for. But I noticed that because the game is so new, there's not a lot of content actually discussing what decks look like. There's gameplay and there's tournament, finals and all that, and that's personally how I learned how to play. But there's not really many things that discuss the meta or good cards versus bad cards or what to look for when you're trying to build your own decks. So I wanted to take a second and kind of discuss some things that I have noticed and I have learned through playing and building my own decks. So let me grab my first deck that I ever built and kind of detail some of the things I put in it. This video assumes that you've already learned the basic instructions of how to play the game, and you know what the avatars do, and you have an understanding of how to play sites and what the sites do, and yada 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 blah blah blah. This is more just a deck tech, if you will, of things that I look for when I build my decks. So this is my Druid. Druid has the abilities to summon Tawny and Bruin. The early game, you want to use Tawny to gather advantage through, control spells. Because he is a spellcaster, it is primarily beneficial to play things that directly have, paths they want to travel. Later on in the game, you want to play Bruin to help protect the avatar if the pressure from your opponent starts getting too high. So I built this deck as a 3-color kind of toolkit deck based around 3 things: board control, board evasion, removal. So early game removal with Tawny, board control with Druid and other spells that restricts where my opponents can go. So since this deck is 3 colors, I kind of want to discuss some of the lands because the lands are about as important as the rest of the deck. Since I am 3 colors, I run a lot of filtration lands that allow me to select what threshold they give me or provide multiple thresholds, as you can see here. I run a lot of lighthouses because this is primarily a wind and water deck, but I also have a healthy amount of fire in there too. I also run 1 copy of Cornerstone because it's kind of funny to be able to play this on my opponent's side and play things on it as like part of the board evasion plan. I run 1 of each of the towers as some mana ramp. Nobody really ever expects them to hit the field. For board control, I run 2 copies of Troll Bridge, which basically says, if the first time a lone enemy enters here, it strikes it unless the opponent discards a card. A little bit of hand hate as well as a little bit of board restriction. Mountain Pass prevents people from passing through it if there's somebody already on top of it. So I can play this and then put Tawny there or something. Because I already have Tawny, so. I run a Fields of Canaan. It's a unique site, so you can only have 1. But this is basically just a board wipe in a pinch. I run Treetop Hideouts and Forges. Both to give Tawny stealth and a lance. That way, if I have to attack with Tawny, I can remove something without having to trade Tawny because lance gives it first strike. And then the stealth just protects Tawny from being targeted by spells because you don't want Tawny to die too soon. And same thing for Bruin, to be honest. You want to play this and protect the bear because once you lose him, you can't get him back. Lookout is just a generically decent card. You can see your opponent's hand and kind of, if I know what's coming, I can prepare for it. If I see they have a removal spell in their hand, I might not activate the Druid to get Bruin out. And then each of the colors has these little extra threshold lands when they enter. It adds blue normally, but when it enters, the turn it enters, it adds the rest. And since this is a 3-color deck, I'm going to be needing a lot of threshold. There's some other lands in here too, kind of some utility stuff. I have a lot of beasts, so I run a pond. I think I run 2 ponds. Untouched, Oasis, all the dual lands. For a little bit extra board control, I actually forgot to mention this guy. I run a Babbling Brook. I run 1 copy of it. It would synergize better in a Submerge deck, but it works for this deck too because it just comes in and says, you can't do anything in these nearby sites, and it allows me to restrict that part of the board. And since I have so much board evasion, I can just kind of, these are all disabled, but I can go over here instead. And with that, let's move on to spells. So like in Magic, Sorcery has its own form of mana ramp. I run 2 cards of mana ramp. The first card is Aquamarine Core. My opinion, probably the best core. It's the blue one. It provides a blue threshold and a mana. So the turn it enters, it acts like a land, and then every following turn it provides that 1 mana, and it really just lets you get a turn ahead when it comes to mana. And then Shrine of the Dragon Lord. It really wants to go on dragon decks. The Genesis teleports all dragons to that spot. Ideally, you could play this and, on like the front lines, and it would teleport all your dragons to the front lines, and you can swing from there. But it also has this adds the 4 threshold and 1 mana. I'm only 3 threshold. I'm the wind, water, and fire. I don't have earth, but it's nice to just have access to all 3 at any given time. As mentioned earlier with the treetop hideout, giving Tawny stealth is very important, or just giving my troops stealth is fairly important, because I'm going to be on their, I'm going to be trying to play troops on my opponent's side, so preventing them from being able to target them is really good. So I run 2 copies of Fade and a copy of Vanishment. Vanishment gives everybody at once stealth and draws a spell, so it adds to that cycle. And Fade also gives something stealth, and then if it's on an enemy territory, I draw a card. It's probably going to be on an enemy territory because that's how I built the deck. Regarding placing things on enemy territory, I run 3 Saracen Scouts or Saracen Scouts that they literally just say may be placed on any territory with no enemies. If somebody's putting pressure on me, I can just be like, boom, this is on your side now. And the Saracen Raiders does the same thing, but it actually has haste, it has charge, so it can come in and then immediately attack. This one, it adds a little bit of extra pressure. This one's more potential pressure later on. Regarding more evasion, I run a Thundering Giant. Once per turn, you can kind of teleport it around, and when it teleports, it can tap all enemy units. So what I can do is I can be like, okay, teleport this over here. It also has charge. Teleport it, tap everything down you can't block, swing, Or if it's like I have people here and there's enemies here, teleport here, tap them all down, swing, 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 and just kind of all-out assault. I want to get another copy of this just because it's a decent high-end beater body. But I also just run a lot of little cheap guys. Wild Fanatic, I have 1 copy of this. It's the only copy I own. This is probably something I would look into getting more of just because it has 2 mana for a 2/2 and it has haste. Real nice. I play this. You weren't really expecting it. I hit you. For some more high-end beaters or just hard to deal with threats, I've got 1 copy of Gyre Hippogriffs. This is, again, another card that I want another of. It's got Airborne, it's got Charge. This is a meta card, like one of a mid-range beater. You play it, it can attack the turn you play it, and it's got evasion. And then as a top-end beater, I run 1 copy of Ancient Dragon. It's 7 mana, it's a lot of red. I don't really have a lot of red, but it's a good card. It's got Airborne, and I can tap it to Fire Breathe a nearby site, or nearby, so I can do it the site it's on. I can do it over here. I can do it anywhere. Nice removal, high end. This thing has won me a game before. Regarding spells, as I mentioned earlier. Oh, sorry, one more minion. Helpful Hob. I run a full play set. I've got 4 of them. When it enters, it untaps. So part of the issue with Druid is that he has to tap to summon his familiars. So when you summon Bruin, that kind of puts you behind a land because you had to choose to get Bruin over getting a land. So I can go, tap, get Bruin, play this, untap, get another land, or, vice versa. Sometimes I've already got Bruin, I just, tap, draw the land, untap, play the land. It also it's a really good utility creature. It untaps any ally, so I could, attack with the dragon, play Helpful Hob, untap it, attack with the dragon again. These things come in clutch. Now regarding our spells, I've got, a bit of a a combo in here, or a synergy, I should say. I run 3 Led Astrays and 2 Riptides, which basically allow me to move where things are. Led Astray specifies enemies, and I can move a whole bunch of enemies at once. Riptide just chooses an enemy and pulls it into a water site. And the reason why these are relevant, or actually Riptide chooses any unit. This specifically says enemies. Riptide chooses any unit. I run a Black Plague in here, so I can, force my opponent to stay in the plague and slowly kill off all their stuff. This is another version of like the board control aspect where I can just kind of keep a certain area on lockdown and prevent them from doing stuff. Regarding some early game removal, I've got Magic Missiles and Burning Hands. These are the things that you want to keep Tawny around for. Burning Hands, I can play Tawny in the middle area and I can get Tawny in the middle and just kind of boom, 2 areas, get eviscerated. Or I can go, Tawny's over here, shoot, snipe your things. Regarding some board restrictions, I already talked about Troll Bridge and the Mountain Pass, but I've also got 2 copies of Bailey. Enemies can't move here on the ground. A lot of people run ground units. Of course, this doesn't stop burrowing, and it doesn't stop submerge, and it doesn't stop airborne, but just ground units not being able to reach it, this has saved me. I've been on death's door and played a Bailey, and they just couldn't get to my avatar. I used to run Hider Sprites in here in combination with Lookouts, but it was just too specific. Now, I also run, because the main theme of the deck is to play troops behind enemy lines. I run 4 copies of Power of Flight and a tactical move. Basically, I can give things flying and then move them across the board to go punch my opponent in the face. Or, primarily how I use that is that it's like, my opponent's on death's door and they're running away and they're trying to build their defenses, and I just say, look, I don't need to. I can just go over your wall. But yeah. Regarding deck building in general, I kind of choose to look for cards that either add mana, specify threshold, move themselves, or draw me cards. I don't want to play a card and be down a card. I would much rather include a card that says, play this card, draw a card. Especially with Druid. Druid already generates board advantage with Tawny and Bruin, so at the end of the day, if I haven't activated him, I can get Bruin out and I have a creature. The fields of Cayman, board wipe land, that is really good in this deck because I can, board wipe, they lose everything but one thing, I lose everything but one thing, and then I activate, get Bruin, so now I have 2 things. Allows me to recover a little bit faster. As some honorable mentions, I kind of forgot to mention in the actual full deck tech, I also run Magellan Globe, which gives me more evasion. I can, it connects the ends of the realms, so I can lock down this area of the board and just kind of attack you from here, It creates a full circle. And then the Goswit Helmet is probably one of the more funny cards I've added to the deck, because Bruin says if he's nearby your avatar, he takes damage for the avatar, and the Goswit Helmet says if he takes damage, prevent the damage. So if they try to attack my avatar, Bruin tanks it, but instead of Bruin taking the damage, the Goswit Helmet just goes to my hand, and I can just replay the Goswit Helmet. That kind of helps with the board control plan. But yeah, overall, this game is extremely fun. I recommend for deck techs in general, just try to include a majority of cards that replace themselves or cards that can move themselves without having to take any action.